Hey everyone, it's me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi out here in Northern California. Welcome to the Peaceful Reflections Zentangle inspired class. This is actually a Zenscape class, and I'm really excited to be teaching this for the San Rafael Public Library. So let's talk about the things that we're going to need for class today. I'm going to be working with a number 2 pencil. This is just a regular graphite pencil. I will be doing most of the class in wallpaper today, so grab your favorite color pencils and play along with me as we do most of the piece in color pencil. Now, at the end of class, I will be working with a jelly roll. I happen to have a 10 jelly roll, but you can work with your favorite white gel pen and it'll be just fine. Now I am working on tiles that are 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches with super smooth paper. You can use cardstock for this or Bristol for this, or you can just use your favorite sketchbook and play along with us, and that's just fine. All you have to do is just draw a square that's 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches and you're good to go. So with that said, let's get started with the Peaceful Reflection Zentangle Zenscape class. So let's get started with a little bit of a meditation. Some of you might have noticed that it's been a little while since the last video, and I do apologize. There have been some family things going on for me that I've had to take care of, but I know a lot of us are going through a difficult time right now, so let's just take a moment to find a little bit of refuge here and get ready to create. So let's go ahead and sit up nice and tall. Let your shoulders melt away from your ears. You can let your hands rest in your lap. And if you feel comfortable with it, you can allow your eyes to close for a moment, or you can let your eyes softly gaze on something that's right in front of you. And take a moment to connect with your breath as you breathe in through the nose and gently out through the mouth. Breathing in through the nose, full body breath here. And gently out through the mouth. And one more time, in through the nose. And out through the mouth. Just staying with your breath for the next few moments here. I'm going to share a poem, and this is from Mary Oliver. This is called Mornings at Blackwater. And she says, "For years, every morning I drank from the Blackwater pond. It was flavored with the oak leaves and also, no doubt, the feet of ducks. And it always assuaged me or eased me from the dry bowl of the very far past. What I want to say is the past, and the present is what your life is, and you are capable of choosing what that will be, darling citizen. So come to the pond, or the river of your imagination, or the harbor of your longing, and put your lips to the world and live your life." And just taking a moment to let that simmer with you for a moment. Let's take in another deep breath right here. And let it go with a sigh. And when you feel ready, wiggling in your fingertips and wiggling in your toes and adding vision back into your practice. And let's get ready to create. Here we go. I've got a number 2 pencil in my hand here, and all I'm going to do is start by creating a diagonal line that's going to work its way through the piece. And you can see that I'm not trying to make the line straight. It's got a little bit of jaggedness to it. It's just fine. This is going to be our part of our string, which is our division for how we actually tangle in a piece here. So starting with the horizon line here, and you can see that now my square is actually on the diamond here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start to build a little area in here for us to tangle in a little bit later. These are going to be our mountains for our Zenscape here. And so what this is going to look like is I'm just going to very, very lightly here with my graphite pencil start to create some low lying mountains here. So I'm just going to create these little wavy lines that are going to come down, and I'm not being overly perfectionistic about this. I want it to have an organic feel to it, and you can see that I'm staying a little bit low but not too low. Okay, so you can see there's my first set of mountains there. Now my second set, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up just a little bit on the diamond here, and I'm going to rise up, creating a really nice peak here, and then I'm going to drop down. And this is, semi close to the middle here because we're going to have our sun rising up in there. So you can see that I'm just going to let this kind of have a real jaggedy kind of feel as it goes off to the side like so. I'm going to zoom in on this so that you can really see what I'm up to. And then finally, as I get closer to the middle here, and it'll be slightly off, I think, I'm going to create another set of mountains that are going to go up and then up again. And so I'm going to have this really lovely area in which to work. Okay, so you go ahead and create your mountains. I'm going to create mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work on the bottom and start to build our flowers into the piece. So a few years ago, I had seen a really beautiful variation on henna drum, which is one of my favorite Zentangles, and I wanted to share it with you now. So generally, henna drum is done with 2 arches, and then let me go ahead and zoom in on this. And then we do these kind of antennae that come out, and then I'm going to do kind of this soft petal-like shape here. I'm going to create another antennae shape and then just build right off of it to create henna drum. Okay, and so it just looks a little bit like this. Now typically that's how henna drum is done, and we usually do a couple of flicks going out from the center. This is a very popular tangle in the Zentangle world, but when I saw it in this Inktober variation, I thought this is really a great way to do henna drum. So let me share it with you. We're going to start with a pyramid of circles. Now, once I have that, I'm going to go into the center, and some of you may know this as caviar or eagle eye, but I love this tangle. I think it's beautiful with the aura in the center. Now, usually what people do is just do a little shading on one side just to give it a little bit of dimension. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by using these circles as a guide. I'm going to come up and create my antennae, and then I'll do a soft little petal there. I'm going to turn the tile here, and I'm going to do it again. Coming out, and then I'll go ahead and I'll do it again over here. And you can see that I'm trying to make my petals about the same size. So you get this really pretty, almost triangular flower in here. Now once I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build off the side of it. So I'm just going to jump off the side and create a petal that comes out. I'm going to do another one over here, and then I'll do another one that comes out over here. And this almost gives it like a pansy kind of feel, like a pansy flower. Now, instead of doing my flicks from the bottom, I'm going to do just a couple of flicks from the top. And you can see that that's already starting to give this a little bit of interest. Now, if you like to see a little bit of a smaller petal coming out from the back, you can do a nice smaller petal that just comes in where that little V is between these two. So you can see that I'm just going in and creating these little soft petals anytime I see like a little area that has a valley to it. And I think that that brings such a neat feeling into the piece. And once again, you can bring in just a couple of flicks, just like so. And it's just a really beautiful flower. So let's go ahead and bring this into our piece. Now, anytime I'm doing any kind of organic layering, like layering of flowers in this specific piece, I'm going to come away from the bottom and do some mapping. And so what this is going to look like is I've got about 1 inch here, and I'm going to do a little arch. And then I'm going to do a smaller arch right next to it. And then I'll do another arch on the other side. It'll almost look like a mouse with ears right in here, or like a little top of a teddy bear. And this for me is just a guide for how I'm going to build my flowers. Okay, now most of this class is going to be done in the technique of wallpaper, and wallpaper is where you are tangling with the color that you are coloring with. And so for me, what I love to do is I love to use this technique in order to build texture and also give a little bit of interest to the piece. So the colors that I'm going to be using for our flowers are goldenrod, which is PC1034, and this is going to be kind of a light mustardy color, but you can also use a yellow, like sunburst yellow or yellowed orange. Any of those will do, or a nice mustard yellow. I'm also going to be working with terracotta, which is PC944. This is a nice warm brown, really great for tangling with, and these two colors work quite well together. I'm also going to be working with one of my favorite colors in the Prismacolor set, and this is Copenhagen Blue, which is PC906. And what this is it's a nice navy color. So if you're not working with Prismacolors, don't worry about it. Just try to get in the same hue as me, okay? So when we come back, we're going to start to bring in these flowers in the wallpaper fashion. All right, so I'm going to start with the blue here, and remember how we started the flower with our circles? We're going to start with the circles. You can see I'm in the center of that first arch right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with that first circle. And then I'm going to do another circle right next to it, and then another one right here, okay? Once I have those, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create the aura on the inside. And you can see these are pretty small auras in here. Once I've got that, I'm going to let go of the Copenhagen Blue and I'm going to start to build out my flower. So you can see that I've got terracotta in my hand. This is the brown that I'm going to be working with. And I'm just going to start by building those antennae that come out. And then I'll start to come up and out. Now you can see I kind of broke my my barrier there with my arch. That's okay. It's just a guideline for me. Okay, I'm going to turn my tile, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build another set of auras here. And you can see that part of that flower is going to fall right off of the page here. I'm going to turn the tile again, and I'm going to do another aura right over here, and I'm going to let it fall off the page. Okay, so I've got this set of 3 right in here. I'm going to start to build by coming in between here and starting to create those layers. Now I'm going to drop down just a little bit on that that petal, and then I'll come out, come up and over, and then drop down a little bit. It's going to create this really nice valley in between, and that's going to be great for later when we do some shading. So I'm once again starting low, coming up and out, and then landing low again. Now for this last one right here, I'm going to just go ahead and start to come out, and I think this one's just going to fall right off of the page here. And you can see that that's giving this a really nice soft feel. Now I do love to see those little petals in the background, so I'm going to do just a couple, just to give this a little bit of dimension. I'll come over here and do a couple, and then over here. And that's all I'm going to do in that background. Now I'm going to start to layer up my flowers here, and I love the idea of underlap and overlap. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first off, I'm going to pick up my eraser and just get rid of my string from that first little area that we worked in. But I'm leaving these two here so that I have just a little idea of where I want to be working. Now I'm going to bring my circles in nice and close to this first flower because I want to get that underlap and overlap. So I'm going to start by building in that first set of circles. I'm going to do an aura, and then I'm going to pick up the brown and start to build it out again. Remember, your string is just there to help you know how far to go. So I'm going to come up and out, building my first set of antennae, creating that nice wave. I'm going to turn the tile here, coming out and coming out, and look, it's going to fall right off the page. Just love that. I love to play the edge on these pieces. I'm going to do the same thing over here and let that go behind. So you can see by having that close proximity, you're getting the idea of building above and below. Remember that idea of starting low on the petals? I'm going to round like a cloud almost and come back in. I'm going to do the same thing over here and get right in there. Now because this piece is kind of fallen off, I'm not going to worry about the bottom. Now I'm looking for those areas where I can add just a little bit of those soft little petals in behind, and I think I can do 2 on these. Just love the way that that's starting to look. It's got a really nice feeling to it. Let's go ahead and do it again on the other side. So you can see I'm going to start pretty close, but I'm going to use this as my kind of guideline for where to start. See how I just kind of used that to line up? And then I'll start in by making that first circle. Here comes the second one, and here comes the third. I'll go ahead and aura on the inside. Once I've got my auras, I'm going to go ahead and start to build. Now remember, if your pencil has gotten a little bit dull, go ahead and sharpen up. Starting to build that flower in there, and as I turn my tile, you're going to see that this is going to go under. I'll go ahead again and start to create those diagonal lines there, and you can see there's the first part of that flower right there. I'm going to go down so that I create a little bit of a valley here, creating that wave, down, and then create the wave. And then because this is so off the page, I don't need to do any more there. Remember those little petals in the background? Let's go ahead and do some of those. And I might just do one that falls right off the page. I just love playing the edge there. For me, there's just something very interesting about playing your edge. Now, I am going to sharpen back up my pencil here because we're going to start to do some color work with this. Now, if you need to pause me for a moment, this is a great place to do it. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep on rolling. I've picked up that mustard color. This is goldenrod. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a demo on how to do the petals, and then I'm going to let you roll with it, okay? So if you've got any of your string left over, you can just grab your nice kneaded eraser and clean those off. You know, I love the kneaded eraser because it doesn't have any debris. So when you're erasing, you don't get all of those little erasure pieces. And it doesn't really move the pencil marks either. So I'm going to take a little bit of goldenrod here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by having the side of the pencil touch the page. Now remember, in my shading technique that I teach you guys, you have 3 different colors with your pencil. You have your light, you have your medium, and you have your dark. It's all about the amount of pressure that you're putting on your pencil. So when I come in here, I'm going to start with the lightest pressure first, and I'm using the side of my pencil. So it's going to go very, very lightly on the bottom and very, very lightly on the top. And you can see that I'm creating a nice sheen in the center of that piece. And this is going to make this really interesting to look at. I'm going to just shade half of this flower for you so that you can see how that sheen develops. Now once I've developed that really nice sheen in there, you can see that I'm staying nice and light with the goldenrod here. I'm going to start to also add in a little bit of shade in the background here. Notice that I'm leaving the tips of these petals nice and light. I'm going to go ahead and pick up my brown here. This is the terracotta, and I'm going to start to give this a little bit of darkness. Now, because the terracotta is so dark, I don't have to press hard because it does have so much pigment to it. Now, I am going to come back in with a little bit of my goldenrod, and I will blur this out, but first I'm adding in the shadows first. Okay, so there's my shadows. And then I'm going to pick up the goldenrod, and you can see that just by going over it with the goldenrod, it starts to blur those colors. And it creates a really nice softness. I'm going to come in here, add in a little bit here, and a little bit over here. I'm going to soften this up just a little bit. And if you want to use your white to give you a little bit more of a blur, you can. That's just fine. But you can see that this is already starting to come to life. Picking back up a little bit of that terracotta, I'm going to go to where I've got the little valleys here and just add a couple of flicks. And then from the bottom, I might add a couple of flicks too. And even on these little ones right in here, just a little bit of definition there. And you can see that this is already starting to come to life, which is really, really pretty. So go ahead, I'm going to start to go into all of these and use that same technique, and then when we come back, I'm going to start to bring in a new flower for us. Alright, so before we start in with our next flower, I'm just going to come back in with some of that blue, and I'm just going to very softly shade about half of that internal aura that we have here. Just giving this a little bit of interest to the centerpiece. And you can see that that really starts to get that to pop, which is really fun. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to do mine, and then when we come back, we're going to work with the tangle called Le Tuc. All right, so let's go ahead and bring in our next tangle. And this next tangle is called Le Tuc or Le Tuc, and I'm not really sure how she's pronouncing it, so I'm just going to go for it and teach you guys the tangle itself. Now, I think this tangle is a little bit of a spin-off of Spin Rose, and so I'm just going to show you how to do it. So I'm going to start with a circle. And then what she does is she puts a happy face at the bottom of the circle. And then she comes over to the top and she does a crescent moon that comes around and touches the bottom of the circle, or the half circle. And then she comes over to that first half circle and starts a little bit past the top, and she comes around and does another crescent moon that comes to meet. So you can already see that this is starting to develop a really nice kind of feel there. Now, once we've got that in there, what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit more to it. So I'm going to come to the bottom and I'm going to do another happy face. And then I'm going to go up to the top, and right off the top of it, I'm going to do another crescent moon. Once I have that, I'm going to come over to the side and do another crescent moon. And then on the other side, I will also do a crescent moon. And you can see how that looks like a rose that is opening up. Isn't that so cool? So then what she goes and she does is she creates these really nice petals that go all the way around. And you could, go hog wild with this and do however many petals you wanted to do, but for the sake of class today, I'm just going to keep it really simple. Now remember those crescent moons that we started with? What she does is she rounds them off a little bit. So I'm just going to start from the inside. Remember how we started with that first crescent moon with the happy face? All I'm going to do is go to the corners and round off the corners. I'll go to my second crescent moon here, which is right here, and I'm just going to round off those corners. I'll go to this crescent moon right here and round off these corners. Here's my next crescent moon. All I'm doing is just rounding off the edges here. Coming in here and in here, over here and in here, and then finally getting to the outer edges. And there you can see that Latook really kind of takes off. It's such a cool tangle. I really, really love it. So let's go ahead and bring it into our piece. Okay, so to bring in Latook into our piece here, I've switched over to magenta, which is PC930, and I'm going to be using this to create the rose itself. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just a little bit above where we have this flower right here. So I'm going to begin right about here for this. And let me go ahead and zoom in on that so you can see where I'm at. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a nice small circle. Now once I have that circle, I'm going to put the smiley face on the bottom. And then I'm going to do the crescent moon starting on the left-hand side and coming right underneath that smiley face. I'm going to go over to the right side, and you can see that I'm starting a little bit past on the left side and let it come around and touch the bottom of the smiley face. Now once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a smiley face again on the bottom. Once I've got the smiley face on the bottom, I'm going to go up towards the top, make another crescent moon, let it touch the bottom, and then I'll do another one on the right hand side, starting over on the left just a little bit and coming in and creating that really nice spin rose kind of feel to it. Now I'm going to create those really pretty petals, and it's going to look a little something like this. So I always tend to start on the top when I do my rose petals, and I'm just going to go ahead and create my rose petals here, and you can see that part of it will probably fall off and part of it will probably go behind. I'm going to do another set to make it look like it's going to go behind. And I might even do, well, I think I'm going to leave it like that. So now I'm going to come in and start to do those really soft round offs. Remember how we started from the inside? Remember, you want your pencil to be nice and sharp. So I'm doing all of my stuff with the magenta first. So you can see that I just did the first crescent moon. I'm going to go over to the second one. And then I'm going to come over here and do another. So I'm just working in the crescent moons here. And then I'm starting to work my way out. And you can see that that's really, really pretty, and it develops a nice feeling inside. So once we have that, I'm just going to go over to the other side and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to start to balance the piece just a little bit. So let's start over here again. I'm going to use this as my guide here, and I'm just going to start to make a circle. Once I have the circle, I'm going to do the smiley face at the bottom, or a crescent moon, just like so. Coming to the top, make another crescent moon that touches the bottom. Go ahead and make another crescent moon on this side. And then once again, a nice smiley face at the bottom. And then once again, coming over to the top, creating a crescent moon right here, and then coming over to the other side and creating a crescent moon right there. Super, super fun tangle. I really, really love it. So I'm going to come around and start to do my petals. And you can see that I'm slightly falling off the page here on certain parts. And then I'll go ahead and I'll do another petal that's going to go behind. And maybe I'll do another one that comes up over here. Perhaps one over here. Okay, once I've got that, I'm going to go in and start to do that rounding off of the crescent moons. I always start from the inside out on this. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. So all I'm doing is I'm going to wherever I see a corner on my crescent moons, and I'm rounding them off and filling them in. Just getting in there until I've got them all rounded off. Just love the way that that looks. It's such a pretty tangle. So go ahead and finish that part of your shading, and then when we come back, we're going to start to do a little bit more shading with this, and it's really going to pop. So we're going to bring some shading into this piece here. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start to bring a little bit of softness into the center. And I'm just ever so lightly using a little bit of that magenta and very, very lightly just touching the page with it. You can see here I pressed heavily and here I'm pressing nice and light. I'm going to let that shading start to drift outward here very, very lightly with that magenta. And you can see that I'm just hugging the line here, trying to leave a highlight on the outside of the piece. You can see there's where I'm trying to leave the highlight. Coming in right over here, and over here. Letting it start to drift outward. And you can see that just by doing that little bit of shading, it really creates that soft petal shape. Coming in here. Going up and around. Now once I've got that, if I've got any places where I've got a valley in there, I'm going to give it a little bit of a push with my pencil. Just a little bit of intensity right in those areas. Just to give it a little bit of interest. Now once I have that, I'm going to switch over to a nice light pink color. This is the Blush Pink PC928, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come to where the edge is meeting the white, and I'm going to start to very lightly blur that edge with a little bit of the pink. And this is going to start to give this a little bit of a glow. Can see I'm being very careful to try to leave the highlight in there. Getting that pink to soften up the magenta a little bit. And you could always take your white pencil after you're done. Here, I'll grab mine, and you can see that I'm just going to go in and just soften up my colors a little bit. And isn't that such a pretty tangle? Look at how cool that looks. I just love that highlight. That highlight is so pretty. Now if you want to come in there and make it feel a little bit like a watercolor, you can see that I've got goldenrod in my hand. I'm just going to dust a little bit of goldenrod here and there, just to tie it back to those first flowers. And you can see that I'm just slowly working my way in towards the center, giving it a little bit of interest, almost as if it was reflecting off of the flower, which is really cool, so that when I zoom out, look at how nice that looks together. Now I am going to come in and just give this a little bit of a push right around the edges, just to keep it interesting. So go ahead, play with this flower, play with the shading, enjoy what you're doing, and I will see you in a minute. For this next part, we're going to start to work with the water here. And what I'm going to do is really start to make these flowers kind of come into the forefront. And so I'm going to start with two different colors. I have a light blue and a dark blue. I'm going to work with the Copenhagen blue, which is PC906, and that's the center of our flowers here. And then I'm going to work with light aqua, which is PC992. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the light aqua first, and you can see that my light aqua is really well sharpened up. And I'm going to start by laying the side of the pencil down on the paper, and you can see how I'm holding the pencil. I'm really far back, and I'm going to start to bring in a soft dusting of color right along that horizon line. You can see that all I'm doing is using the side of the pencil, and I'm going in little circles. And you can see that I'm making pretty quick business of filling in the space around where the flowers are. So you can see I'm dipping into this corner, and then I'm going to come down and dip into this corner over here. Once I've had a chance to do that, you're going to see me start to hug where these flowers are, and really just focusing on staying on the side of the pencil. You'll notice that there's an area inside of where I have the blues here that's actually staying white. And that's really meant to be kind of like a sparkle on the water, as it were. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let some of this come up and break it up. Notice how it's kind of an organic feel. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on that here. I'm not trying to make any hard lines. I want it to feel like it is really organic. So you can see that I'm just kind of drifting in and out of that white and making it look a little bit organic. So that's the light turquoise. Now I'm going to pick up the Copenhagen blue, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to create almost like reflections in the water of what we have for our mountains. So I'm working very, very lightly on the side of that pencil here, and you're going to start to see me come out a little bit and create a reflection in the water. Now you'll notice where I have the light, I'm not going into it. So you can see I kind of left that alone. I'm going to dip into this and come out a little bit where I would have had a little bit of the mountain in here. And the same thing over here. Coming out and creating a little bit of a reflection of the mountains. You can see that that's how that's working. Now I am going to start to come around my flowers and bring a little bit of a shadow right around the outside edge. And I'm just going to do half of this for the sake of the video here. So I'm just bringing a little shadow. I'm not pressing hard yet. And then I'll even come around in here just a little bit, just to give that a little bit of interest. To blur that out, I'm going to go ahead and start to bring some of that light aqua in and very, very lightly start to blur it out. And you can see that that's starting to bring in a nice shadow, gives a little bit of depth around those flowers. And then I'll even start to work inside of the mountains a little bit that are reflecting in the water, just to give this a little bit of interest. You can see that's starting to soften up a little bit. And then what I tend to do when I'm working with a background like this is I'll pick up my white and I'll start to use that white to just really get it to blur, especially with water. And you can see that the white really starts to give a little bit of pop to that color. It almost gets pastel-y in nature whenever you add white to something like this. And I think that that just gives it a really pretty painterly look. Now you've heard me say it before, and I will do it again in this piece. I love my color pencils to look a little bit like watercolor. For me, there's just something really fun about playing and kind of giving it a little bit of a watercolor feel. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick back up that really pretty goldenrod, and I'm just going to bring little hints of it into the water. Now I will go in and do a little bit of shading around these flowers in here, but I just wanted to give you kind of a head start so that you could play and have some fun with yours. I'm going to finish up working on mine over here, and then when we come back we're going to start to work in our mountains, and this is really going to start to come to life. Alright, so we're going to let go of the blues here and we're going to start to pick up some purples. I've got like a really kind of grapey purple and a violet together. So this is violet, which is PC 932, and then I have dahlia purple, which is 1009. And I love these two together when you are working with them and shading. So I'm just going to show you a little bit and then we're going to jump right into it. So you can see that I still have my lines from earlier on when we were working with the graphite here. I'm going to use the darker of the two. I'm going to use the violet first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm just going to very lightly retrace those lines with the violet. Now you could come in, this is a technique that I actually love to use, if you have your gummy eraser, you could come in and you can see how I'm just kind of letting my eraser kind of stick to the page and then lift up a little bit. That's a great way of lifting graphite and making a lighter line. It's a wonderful way of getting rid of the graphite before you work with your pencil. So you can see I'm kind of sticking that kneaded eraser to the page and it's just kind of lifting up, and you can see it's lightened up my line quite a bit. So if you want to do that, you absolutely can. It's a nice trick to do. Otherwise, I'm just going to come in with my violet over the top of it. And you can see I'm not pushing really hard with the violet. The violet's going to do a nice enough job of just adjusting right into where that graphite is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with that really nice violet and start to just lightly shade underneath it. Let me go ahead and zoom in on this so that you can really see what I'm up to. So what I'm doing is I'm doing little circles like I always do, and that just gives it a softer blend. And you can see that I'm working on the side of the pencil. What that does is it just helps me to reach more of the paper in a much more easy way. So you can see that I'm just starting to let that come in. And I want it to have a really organic feel. So that's why I'm using kind of a rough way of bringing in the color and just softly hitting that line. I don't want that line to be overly outliney, if you know what I'm saying. And so I'm starting to just get really organic with it. I'm getting messy. And that for me really breaks up those lines and gives it a softness. Now once I've got that first kind of dusting over with the violet, I'm going to put down the violet and I'm going to start to pick up the dahlia purple. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to start right where the dahlia purple is meeting the white, and you can see that I'm kind of rolling over both of them. And then I'm starting to work my way down. And I kind of want it to look like there's like a soft fog or a mist that's down by the water. You can see that I'm just kind of rolling over that violet and just kind of leaving these little spaces of lightness underneath. This is a really lovely way to work with mountains. It's just kind of like a silhouette. I see this silhouette often in Truckee and in the Lake Tahoe area, and so it's really kind of a nice way to do a mountain scene. You can see I'm just kind of rolling back and forth. And then once I've got that the way that I want it, I can start to pick up the white again. Now, if you have some blue that's on your white pencil, you can just use your thumb and rub that to get it to move on, or you can take your sharpener and just resharpen your pencil here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to bring in little pieces of that white. I'm not going to do it everywhere. I'm going to keep it a little bit more organic. Just giving the idea that there's a mist on the water. Really kind of keep it interesting. I'm sure you've seen that beautiful mist on lakes before. I've seen it when I've been up at Lassen, and that's been really beautiful. So there's lots of really beautiful ways to do this. So I'm going to use this technique throughout. So I'm going to pick back up that violet again and do the same thing up in here. And then when I get down towards these other mountains, I'm going to let that mist hug the mountains in there. So once again, coming back in with the violet and getting right in there. I'm not pressing hard because I don't want to have a distinctive line there. And then just to give you an idea, I'm just going to go ahead and start to let that violet roll in. And you can see the way that I'm holding that pencil, I'm really far back. And just letting this be really organic and soft. And you can see where I'm going to stop. I'm going to probably stop right before there and get right in. So go ahead and start with your mountains, and then I'll show up in a couple of moments and you'll see kind of how I handled that next set. And I'm just going to use that same technique that I used right down in here up here. So go ahead and play. Don't feel like there's any one way to do this. I really want you to have kind of a fun time playing with color and enjoying the organicness of what you're dealing with, okay? All right, I'll come back in a couple minutes. So this is really coming along. I hope that you're enjoying it too. I'm just going to go ahead and bring in some of that violet in this last part right in here. And once again, using that same technique of bringing in a little bit of that violet underneath. And just laying that down. And then coming back in with a little bit of that lighter color, that lighter purple. Still keeping that mist in the mountains here. Using the side of the pencil here, so I'm really not using the point at all. And then I'll come back in with a little bit more of that violet and kind of blur the two together. Really love the way that that looks. Getting that nice kind of misty, foggy feel of the mountains. You could even come in with some of that pink. Remember how we had that pink down in here? You could bring in a little bit of that pink right along the edges just to, muffle them a little bit. You can see that that'll just give it a little bit of vividness. Could even come in down here with a little bit of that pink and break it up a little bit, give it a little bit more softness. And if you wanted to, you could even pick up some of that goldenrod and just dust in a little bit of goldenrod just to give a little glow along those areas where you have fog in here. You can see I'm just kind of lightly dusting that in, and I love the way that looks. And I love to roll a little bit of that goldenrod even into where we've got the dahlia purple. It gives it a little bit of that alpine glow, which is kind of nice. Loving the way that looks. Just gives it a really nice softness. So when we come back, we're going to start to work with the background and we're going to add our final tangle. It's going to be a version of moon pie in the background. So I love the idea of a sunset in the background. So I've actually picked up my light blue again. This is the light aqua, and I'm going to start with a little bit of that light aqua in here. And I'm just going to work on the side of the pencil doing little circles. You can see that I'm just doing little circles to fill the space, working on the side of the pencil so that I have the most opportunity to fill the space. But I also want it to feel like there's a sunset in there, so I'm going to break it up just a little bit. You can see that I'm leaving a little bit of white up at the top here, and that's where some of our color is going to come in. And I'm really hoping that you guys are going to fall in love with the idea of a Zenscape and want to do more of these and just play. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of my magenta here, and I'm just working a little bit of that magenta into the area where the white meets the blue. Just letting that kind of come around. And then finally I'm going to take a little bit of the goldenrod again, and I'm going to bring that goldenrod in where the magenta is meeting the white. And you can see I'm not doing a ton to blend in here. I'm really just laying down color. I'm going to keep it a little bit messy because I'm going to get to blend in a couple of minutes, and that's really going to do a lot. So you can see it almost looks like, well, if you're a child of the 80s, we used to have these rocket popsicles, and it kind of looks like a rocket popsicle where it has the blue and the red, and then how it had the white at the top. And you can see that I've come back in with a little bit of the light aqua, and I'm just giving it a little bit of a shading around the mountains in here just to give it a little push. And now we're going to start to talk about the Tangle moon pie. Okay, so go ahead and do your background, and then I'm going to just give a quick demo of moon pie. So moon pie is actually a headquarters tangle created by Rick and Maria, the two folks that started Zentangle. And you know, there's many different ways to do moon pie, but I'll just show you the more typical way of doing moon pie. So moon pie usually is done inside of a V-like shape, and you usually have an arch with a more narrow arch, and then you have a thicker arch with a narrow arch behind it. And generally what people do is they'll do orbs inside, and then they'll pool around their orbs. And then what some people will do is they'll do some kind of a flower-like petal that goes over the top of it, and that's your typical moon pie. Okay, now you could, you know, take this little area in here, and you could also go ahead and bring color into this area, and that also gives it more of a graphic feel. Now for our moon pie, I think what we're going to be doing is something a little bit more mandala-like, but I feel like, you know, it's just good to show you where these things originate from, because it just helps to give context to what you're working with. So let's bring moon pie into our piece. I'm going to hold my Copenhagen blue. This is the darker blue of the two, and you can see that I've got this natural valley that has kind of created itself in here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with an arch first, just like we did in the other. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on that. And then I'm going to do a really nice little arch behind that first arch. Now once I have that, I'm going to start to do another arch that's a little bit thicker. And inside of that arch, I'm going to do orbs. And you're going to see that my orbs are going to connect with each other. And this is where I love working with wallpaper. It's just one of those things where moon pie just lends itself so well to wallpaper. I'm going to come in and I'm going to pool between my orbs with a little bit of that darker blue. And then once again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a narrow arch behind it. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a nice thick arch behind it. Now you'll notice that as soon as I get to any red parts, I stop. You can see that I've stopped here. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my magenta and I'm going to continue that arch with the magenta. Now, once I have that, I'm going to come in with my blue, and I'm going to start to do these kind of arched petals. And you can see that I just kind of go down and then jump in again. Now you can see there's some pink there, and I want to honor the idea of doing wallpaper. So you're going to see me kind of skip around a little bit before I get in there. And then once I get in there, I'm going to come up with a little bit of blue, and then I'm going to pick up a little bit of my magenta. Now, if you don't have this situation where you're doing your moon pie, that's fine. I'm just showing you how I'm handling the color when I get to two different colors here. I just love the way that it looks when you actually are honoring the color that's actually there. It shows off the moon pie even more and gives it a little bit of pop. So you can see in here I've got some pink in between, so I can come in with a little bit of that magenta and it really gives a neat pop in there. I'm going to come back in with a little bit of the blues and give this a nice filling in. And I just love the way that that looks. It just gets your eye to pay attention. Now in these, I think I'm going to add just a little bit of detail by bringing in a little line. And then as I start to move outward, I'm going to create some petals behind this. And so what this is going to look like is I'm going to start with my magenta because I'm in this area that has a ton of that light magenta in it. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to start with a nice petal. And another one right over here. Now you can see when I get down there, there's a little bit of blue. I'm going to pick up and change into the blues again. I know that this is a lot of pick up and change, but it's going to be really interesting by the time it's all said and done. In here there's more blue, so I'm working with the darker blue again. And then once I have that, I think out here I'm going to mimic the petals that we had down in here. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to come up and I'm going to create a little bit of that petal that we had down at the bottom. You can see I'm going to just come up and do that. Can see that I'm honoring the color that's there. I know it's a little bit labor intensive, but it's worth it. And then once I get to the blues, you could see that my brain was working there. So once I've got that in there, I think what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to bring in some orbs. I love putting orbs into the sky, and so I'm going to just start to do some orbs in here. Put one in over here. I'll put one in up in here. And maybe something down in here. Just to really bring some interest into the piece. I'll pick up a little bit of that darker blue one last time and bring an orb over here. Now, if you want to pause me here, this is a great place to do it. Otherwise, if you just want to watch me kind of go for it, I'm going to do some shading in here. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to take that darker blue and I'm going to shade the orb. You can see that I'm just doing about halfway through, and then you can, really start to bring in a little bit of pressure right along the edge of the mountain there. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that light aqua and I'm going to give it a little bit of a blur. I'm going to go ahead and start to do a little bit of shading inside of my orbs. I'm going much lighter than the way I filled it in. That's why it looks like two different pencils. When I use my fill-in, I'm pressing hard. When I'm doing my shading, I'm always pressing light. So it almost looks like two different colors. Can come in with a little bit of the light aqua and blur it out a little bit. And then I'm going to come back in with a little bit more of that light aqua in here and start to press a little bit heavier towards the bottom of the moon pie. I'm going to take a little bit of that darker blue, give it a little shadow. And already this is starting to get more interesting. Isn't that so pretty how that's starting to take over there? Coming up into our little petals in here, I'm going to do a little bit of softness, still using the Copenhagen blue here. Even in this guy right here, I can do a little bit. And this guy over here. And even this little orb is going to get a little bit of the treatment. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that light aqua right here and just give it a little blend. And then I'm going to go up and grab a little bit of that magenta. Once again, going really, really light. This is where pressure matters, right? So often we think it's just about the color. It's not just about the color. It's about the amount of pressure you're putting on your pencil here. I'll go ahead and grab those little orbs over here, just shading half. Super fun. And then finally I'm going to pick up just a skosh of that goldenrod and get right into that orb over here. And if you wanted to, you could even pick up a little bit of that magenta and just give it a dusting on the edge just to make it interesting. And then pick back up the goldenrod again and blur it out. It makes that orb kind of pop forward here. I'm going to pick up a little bit of pink and start to blend those out just a little bit. This is one of my favorite parts about doing a Zenscape, is working on the mandala in the sky. It's just, for me, there's just something about it that's just so fulfilling. So that when I go ahead and I zoom out, look at how cool that is. Isn't that so neat? I just love the way that that looks. And so you go ahead and play Work with your moon pie in there, and then when we come back at the very end here, we're going to add in some white highlights and do some last minute pieces, okay? So one of my favorite ways to make water look like water is to use your gel pen and to create some reflection on the water. And so what this is going to look like is I'm going to come in and just do these very soft little kind of wavy lines with a couple of dots going through the piece here. I'm going to zoom in on that so that you can really see what I'm up to. So all I'm doing is just coming in, and you can see my pen's giving me a little trouble today. Coming in and just doing kind of an interrupted line with a couple of dots, and maybe doing another one right behind it. And that gives it kind of the feeling of water moving. So you can just get right in there and just kind of do kind of a wiggly line and another wiggly line with maybe a couple of dots. And it just makes it look like water moving, which is really kind of pretty. The other place that I'm going to be putting a little bit of color is up in the mandala. I'm going to go ahead and just bring a little bit of a white pop right into the mandala head, and then a little bit of a white pop into where I've got these little orbs here. The other place where you can bring a little bit of white is up into these orbs. You can do a little bit of a sheen on the darker side just to give a little bit of interest into those pieces there. So you can see that I'm just bringing that in as well, which kind of makes that a little bit more interesting, so that when I zoom out, you can see that the water has a little bit of white lines moving through it to make it look like it's reflecting what is behind it. So here we are. What a fun piece this is. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've picked up my dark blue pencil here, and I'm just going to put my chop, which is my initial, right in here in the corner. And that's just my way of just saying that I'm complete with the piece and taking a moment to really enjoy what is on the page, and also to enjoy this time creating and to offer gratitude for this little reprieve from the world that we live in right now. I'm going to bring in another piece that I was playing with earlier. I had done this piece in black and white and thought that I should show you what that looked like as well, and I added a little bit of the goldenrod over the top of the black and white and got this really pretty sepia tone feel to it. So there's more than one way to do this, so I thought I would put them both on the screen for you so that you could get an idea of what was actually there and what you can do with this. Well, if you enjoyed the video, please give the video a thumbs up or leave a nice comment in the comment section. Even better, you can go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and that will let you know every time I add a class to my page. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to see your creations over at the Tangled Yogi Art Community page on Facebook. Go ahead and join us over there. We have a very supportive community, and I love seeing all of your creations and how you change it up and do something different with it. So that's it for me. I'm Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi, and I look forward to tangling with you soon. Bye for now.